All right, and we're live. Cool. Hello, YouTube. Triple A here once again with Duff once again with me there. Say goodbye. Say hello, Duff. All right,
Hi, everyone. How goes it with you this week?
here once again with Duff once again with me there. Say goodbye. Give me one second. I've
Say
got
hello,
some
Duff.
background noise
Hi,
here.
everyone. How goes it with you this week?
There we go. That was extremely weird. I heard myself twice loudly. All right, that's better. Whew. Okay, I can do technology. No worries. Anyway, this week has been. I don't want to say crazy because that's a word that's losing meaning now. Just like SJW, racist, bigoted, homophobic, they just all kind of conglomerate together now and they don't make any sense. But if you have been living under a rock for the past week or so, then you might not know about the craziness going on with Trump's lawyer and the Parkland kids and a porn star making headlines because she's trying to be virtuous and all that kind of fun stuff. But it sounds like right now we have a lot of quote unquote leaders in the DNC or wherever that are not doing a great job leading in the right direction overall. So that's just a little bit terrifying. And to, I guess, let's start things off a little with something that's crazy and funny and ridiculous, but it's happening, and I can't believe what's happening. But of course, we already talked about or it's already been mentioned about the lawyers raid for Trump's lawyer and all that craziness, and that's one thing. But on a slightly funnier note, there have been several interviews with Trump's alleged terrible affair with Stormy Daniels. Of course, he has been accused and most likely had a relationship with Stormy Daniels about much more than 10 years ago with a porn star. Paid her off to be quiet. She came out of the news and relationship with him, and now she is trying to go and become as much of a ham as possible on CNN and any news network that will pick her, and just try to say, "Oh yeah, this was terrible." And now the, of course, goal of the left is to make sure that they take Trump down by saying he's a terrible, misogynistic, infidel kind of person, and he should, resign for this reason, which makes no sense because we all knew how he was in the beginning. But here she is trying to go and make a name for herself, bigger name, with her "Make America Horny Again" tour. Of course, such a great original title. But Duff, have you, I'm assuming, heard of plenty about Stormy, and any thoughts towards her quote unquote morality and her standing up for the women's rights and that kind of thing?
Um, actually, this is the thing which I have been most interested in is Stormy has tried her best to, let's say, although she's trying to be provocative of what she's coming forward and talking about, she hasn't been trying to turn it into, all men are misogynistic. This is a blatant disregard of women's rights and all these particular things. She's actually been pretty much on message, which is she didn't feel that she could come forward with this information. Although you kind of have to put some question marks around that because at one point she was trying to get a book deal out of this interaction with President Trump, or then just Mr. Trump, and she hasn't blown it up. She hasn't turned it into a Me Too kind of movement or moment. But what she is doing is definitely getting publicity. Now, whether or not what she's talking about is trying to get recognition for something which happened to her, which could be really intimidating. Someone comes up to you and potentially threatens you or utters a threatening sentence, and they use the name of someone who's very powerful and very wealthy. That is a pretty frightening thing. But you kind of have to sort of sit there and go, well, where is this trying to go other than the publicity? I think it's kind of ironic that she scheduled a tour at the same time that all this was going on, but at the same time, I guess it isn't ironic. That's how she makes her living. A lot of older adult film actresses actually go through and do tours through strip clubs. I know people like Asa Akira do it, and she's apparently doing it. But it's such an odd media circus because, yet again, this is not someone who has any sort of moral credibility or isn't necessarily traditionally morally credible, talking to someone who, as a wealthy man, is not really morally credible either. So it just makes for awkward TV.
That's fair. Yeah, that's so you would say that she is not overdoing the she's not uh how do you say she's not just going for attention. You think it's also, this is how she kind of makes a living. Is that's kind of fair to say?
Um, I don't know if we can say that it's not for attention, but it's got a weird time delay where if this was something that she was truly terrified about, you would hope, and in most cases, I think in most places in the United States, if a woman goes into a police station and says, "Hey, I feel like my life has been threatened," that they would treat it as a case that needs to be followed up on. So I'm kind of curious that she didn't sort of do that, even though she's claiming that she felt that there could have been terrible ramifications to herself, which is possible. But at the same time, it leaves you in a bit of an odd place, because even at the time when she says that this thing went down, she was a relatively wealthy actress in the adult film industry. She was a producer. She had money. She had lawyers. And so I just can't wrap my head around this other than saying it's like it's the right time, the right moment, and it's a good way to cash in on a lot of stuff, and also maybe voice some long-held fears that she's been having to deal with for the better part of a decade. But I think that's being as generous to Stormy as I can be. But I don't know if that's necessarily warranted.
Well, that's fair. And then there's also the story she had with she felt that was one of the I believe one of the previous allegations was Trump was being intimidating, and she said that she didn't feel anything. I mean, it was a mutual agreement what they did. They were he paid her off, and she didn't feel like she was being threatened. And the only one time where she was threatened was she was in, I believe it was a strip club or something, and she someone came on to her and she gave a description of the guy, and it was, I mean, who knows who it could have been. I don't know if you heard that part of the story, but it sounded like she wasn't.
Oh yeah, that's something which Ben Shapiro and others have been fairly dubious about, especially considering when it comes to sketch artists and stuff like that, you get a gist of something, but this is the gist of something which is over a decade old, and our memories don't work that way. And people have pointed out, it's like this person looks like an amalgamation between their ex-husband, who is the former quarterback of the New England Patriots, and a couple other people. So the picture itself isn't really that great as a tool or as a heuristic. It's just like, oh, there was a man who did something, and this is the man. And it's like, but he appears to be a fairly handsome fellow. And an amalgamation of many different people. So maybe this is an evidence of, as time progresses, our memory become less accurate. And that's assuming that our memories, even in the instant, are completely accurate to what goes on.
That's fair. Yeah, that's true. Well, and now it is interesting to see how she has blown up basically on the interviews and everything else. We're moving towards slightly less adult film industry kind of area. There's also been, I don't know if you've kept up with this, but our great former director of the FBI, Mr. James Comey, is now coming out with his book. I believe The Highest Honor or something along those lines was the title, and he did an interview on CNN, and he described his dealings with Trump and how Trump is a mob boss and all that kind of thing. And I don't know, have you seen the interview or heard anything about the book there, Duff?
Oh yeah, no, I've been listening to the Comey stuff. It's hard to get away from it. But what are your thoughts on their AAA?
Well, it's really, I mean, I guess I'm a little disappointed because before everything happened, before Comey was even really named that everyone knew, I was under the assumption that during the election, Comey was put up as this guy who was fairly even-toed and was pretty good about, did a good job at the FBI. And so I'm like, okay, cool, this is gonna be nice. We'll have a lot of evidence. He's waiting to make sure that he is has Hillary Clinton dead to rights before he makes a move, and he is going to be a fair take the case fairly and make sure that everything is every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and we're going to be able to get a good verdict towards if she was doing things corrupt during the election and that kind of stuff. And so I'm like, great, he sounds like a really cool guy. And then we had his verdict during the election, and I was like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. And then it was he didn't indict her, and then he was going to, and then there's new evidence that didn't really matter, and all these things, and it just seemed really, really sketchy and very, very a lot of flip flopping around. So I was like, well, now I'm losing faith. And then the worst thing was, after I tried to, I gave him kind of the time of day, and of course, he gets let go by President Trump, and then he's like, oh, it's President Trump just angered me for blah blah blah. And to be fair, Trump, I don't think took care of that situation very well. I think if you're going to fire Comey, make sure it's not because you have a bias against him. Make sure it's because he did a bad job, and which he did. But let's make sure that there's not less bias there. And then of course now he's just kind of doing whatever he can to just smack Trump where he can. Which I mean, right now, as far as I understand, the book that he wrote doesn't really give anything away that no one else, nothing new in the book. So it's just more of an annoyance and him kind of saying I'm awesome, which I was hoping was not the case. But this just sounds like more of just attention and poking fun at Trump and making him look as bad as possible because he got fired, and it just kind of rather annoying. But I don't know. Do you think his book is worthwhile reading, or do you also think it's kind of just smiling?
This is a tough one in that not being American, I haven't really felt the desire to go and read that book, because the way this has all gone down is it really just seems like they're loading another one in the chamber and taking another shot without actually trying to come up with something new. So the Democrats, or at least the Democratic Party, in terms of what they've been doing to attack Donald Trump, have been trying to go after his character. And the thing is, nobody voted for him because of his character. So you keep on bringing people up, Stormy Daniels, the former FBI head. All these people are trying to say he has no character, he has no moral integrity. And it's like, yes, and what else is new? And Trump hasn't acted in any other way besides being like Trump, for better or for worse, depending on who you want to talk to. But it kind of speaks to the differences in party persuasion when Trump's DOJ is not afraid to go after Trump's lawyer when they suspect that there might be something a little bit fishy about campaign finances. Whereas the DOJ under Obama's administration was essentially an extension of the Obama administration. They weren't operating independently, and they weren't actually trying to hold people to the same status quo. And so, hence, here you have James Comey, who is essentially finding ways to make a lot of money by bitching about things which he's already talked about, and none of which has stuck with Trump. So once again, it's just more of the same. And I don't in any way sort of understand what the Democrats are trying to get out of this, other than to say it's like the FBI director who didn't get along with Trump didn't actually work very well with Trump. And therefore Trump was like, hey, dude, why aren't you working with me and doing what I ask you to do? I'm your boss. And he's like, well, I don't think you're a credible person. It's like, I'm going to get fired because of this. And it's like, that sounds very, very childish. And for him to try and sell himself as some sort of hero or some as sort of whistleblower is just so weird. And another odd parallel is it's like, I wonder if we were to swap administrations around and what happened with Edward Snowden happened under the Trump administration, whether Snowden would have had to flee the country or whether it would have been treated a little bit more objectively, which just sort of highlights once again that under the Democratic administration, everybody was quite buddy-buddy, and buddy to the degree that they were willing to bend the parameters of their own job description to get done what they felt needed to get done.
Yeah, it's really ridiculous when all the. I agree. I think that's the key. I think you hit the nail on the head there. The Democrats are attempting every way that they can to attack Trump on his character, and that is not why Americans voted for him. That is not at all the. I mean, no one said he was the Jesus Christ figure of marriage and morality and said all the right things and looked great and wasn't. I mean, it's pretty clear when Clinton said, "Hey, we're all deplorables." I mean, it was not a Trump changed his mind on things and said a lot of things that were both good and bad. So it's interesting that, as you say, kind of Democrats can't seem to uh, learn from their mistakes. They do send message very, very well to obviously a fault and cannot get away from the continued, bad, marriage deals and he shouldn't say things and all this kind of things, whatever else, which is bad and hopefully will change given the fact that, come this November, we're going to have to re-elect officials and uh, it's a little scary, at least here. I really don't know how that's going to go. I hope that things aren't too terribly bad, but at the same time, of course, several Republicans are leaving and which you didn't mention at all either. I think you've heard the news with Paul Ryan's departure, correct?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it doesn't seem like it's all that surprising of a thing, simply because Paul Ryan never, under the Trump administration and the way things have been going, has not stood to gain much of anything, because when he does things well, he was never rewarded, and when things went not so well, he was always blamed. And I think, once again, Ben Shapiro and some of the other people I'm listening to are like, there's things which Republicans would probably call him on and say, like, you were too willing to deal with this, you're too willing to deal with that. But he's only one half the equation. And a lot of the times, good pieces of legislation, which Paul Ryan might have worked very hard to get through, didn't survive the Senate reading and the adjustments. And so he was continuously forced into the position of saying, okay, we will make changes if we can get at least this much through, which is in the very nature of politics. The idea that you can railroad stuff in a diverse set of houses and apparatuses for getting laws put through is a bit of a fallacy, and probably reflective more so of a dictatorship-like state, as opposed to multiple interests being played out all at one time. So, Paul Ryan's leaving. I didn't know that his family actually had a history of a genetic ailment, which I think resulted in either aneurysms or heart attacks for him, his father, his grandfather, and others. So that's kind of an interesting aside. But what were your thoughts on Paul Ryan in general there, AAA?
Yeah, I think that on the one hand, it's I don't know. He kind of, good and bad overall. I think that he did do his best to push the legislation he came in there for. I mean, tax reform happened, so good on him to do that. I think that every now and then he had some less, how to say, I wish that some things that he pushed, he didn't push. I think that pushing the stimulus package was a bad idea, especially since he's the numbers guy. And I think that, he is, I guess, leaving at a good time. I mean, he got some of those agenda pieces passed. And like you said, a lot of the times he had good bills or legislation he wanted to pass, and he just couldn't get it done, which is not his fault. It looks like it's more on Mitch McConnell than anything else to kind of go and figure out what to pass, how to get the votes for it, and that kind of thing. So that's not all on him. And yeah, I mean, actually, I didn't know the family illness thing until just now. But I mean, if those are factors, then yeah, he should, say, hey, I did my job. Here's what passed. Here's what didn't. I came to do as much as I can. I think that this is as far as we can go, and so good luck to you guys. And so that way he can say, by November, hey, you know what? I gave my best, made things happen. Good luck to you guys. Here we go. And so he will, quote unquote, end on a high note. So that's good news, and we'll see. Hopefully, we can keep the majority of Republicans in the House and Senate, but at the same time, it might come to the I believe that was I can't remember if it was the first, second term of Obama, but yeah, I hope we don't get any gridlock with one party uh, being majority in one house, and then the next the other party, and then just having nothing get done. And then of course, if we do get a majority of Democrats somewhere, then that'll be uh, geared toward impeachment, and that'll be the fun thing. Which hilariously, if they do impeach Trump, which I doubt they really can, there's nothing to really impeach him on. If they do somehow succeed in impeaching Trump, you get Pence, and it's very funny to hear I hate the rhetoric of President Trump and all those things, but again, Trump says stuff. All of the things that people hate Trump on haven't really happened, and those things that could go wrong, Trump could do and would be foolish to many of us, Democrats want. So if you get Pence in there, who has political background to be the president, and he knows what he's doing, I mean, they're gonna just be wishing for Trump, and it's just a very funny, crazy world to see the hate he's gonna get. So I mean, yeah, I think Ryan, he's done some good things, done some bad things, but I think he did his best job. And so now the new question is going to be who's going to replace him and how that's going to go. But I don't know. Have you seen any reports or any comments with people talking about the potential next replacement for Ryan by chance?
No, I haven't actually seen anything about that. At a certain point, I just can't follow American politics. So, and so this is just one of those ones where it's like, okay, interesting to see what is going to happen. They accused Paul Ryan of being kind of milquetoast, meaning he wasn't too hard on anything, and he sort of went along to get along. And the thing is, if the next person who come in is a real hardliner, and it turns out that the houses flip in the interim elections, people might be praying for Paul Ryan to come back pretty quickly because it's like at least he can work with the other side.
Yeah, no, I agree. That'd be you don't know what you got, and you don't want to you don't miss the person till they're gone. So it's too late, and that's just very sad to see if he's there. But I mean, yeah, I think overall he's done pretty good. So I will be. It'll be sad to see him leave. I think that. And of course, this is the corruption line. At least he meant well, but I don't know if that's maybe the best line to give out there. But I mean, I think overall. So it sounds like overall you think he's okay. Is that fair to say there, Duff?
Yeah, I don't know what people would have expected of a politician, other than that they're going to try and do their best, and sometimes they're going to screw up. And the idea that they somehow are responsible for the rise and fall or the success and failure of all their party's particular positions doesn't really hold up well in reality, is all I would say.
Fair enough. Well, now that being said, we can move on to a bit more global issues in the news. And this next topic, I will admit I'm not a great expert on, and things have been changing fairly rapidly to see, but I am imagining you've heard the dealings that we are having right now with all the issues with human violations in Syria there, potentially?
Yeah, this would be the possibility of chemical weapons being used.
That is, yes. And Trump wanted to, or the U.S. government's potential attacks on Syria and that kind of thing. But as far as what is going on, do you have a pretty good, or I guess, understanding of what's been going on down there and all the atrocities in Syria?
Well, Syria is complicated, of course, because it's a nation which has a lot of significance to the region, and Russia would like an in, and they got it with Syria and the Assad regime. The U.S. has been dragged into what's going on there continuously because of how unstable the Middle East is. But Syria in general is much like a lot of other Middle Eastern countries in that when we think of the Middle East, we tend to think that they are culturally and ethnically one group. So it's like they're just Arabs, let's say. When really, a lot of these nations, especially in that particular region, which was basically historical Judea and Israel, have been migrating to and from, back and forth. And so you have many, many different ethnicities. You have many, many people who've been there for literally thousands of years, and you have people who've been there for hundreds of years. And all of them have a slightly different take on what's going on. But there isn't, and there hasn't really been a type of national identity that you could say we are all Syrians. You'll have people who say we're Syrians, and they go, "What about those people over there?" And you go, "Well, actually, no, they're not really Syrians. They're this. They're an Aramaic-speaking group or something that comes from the back, from somewhere else." So when Western powers try and intervene in the Middle East, we tend to try and play off of different groups and different groups' supposed goals for the region, many of which are tied to a lot of historical grievances, a lot of ethnic tensions and religious tensions. And therefore, we're left trying to look for the good guys, or at least the good guys according to the Western lens. And it leads to all sorts of violence and is a real stalemate, because you can't really point to one particular group and say, oh, if we just leave them in charge, everything will be fine, because that group doesn't exist. And hence, in Syria right now, we see a lot of inter-ethnic, inter-religious, inter-community violence, and a lot of foreign fighters pouring in from other regions in the Middle East because they desire to have a say in Syria's future as well. And we're not too sure who the good guys are, let's say.
That's fair. Well, I guess so. From what you know now, I mean, do you, not to get too deep, because I don't want to. I guess I'll get lost too. In your opinion, do you think that the reaction from our reaction to Syria has been pretty good so far? Or do you think we should back out, go farther? Is there, I guess, is there a good? Have we done, I guess, okay in the situation?
That's tough. I think Syria and Afghanistan and a lot of other of these nations where they've literally had Western intervention forces deployed, but strategically deployed with no long-term plan, we've actually made things worse, let's say. The fact that most of these wars end up being PR campaigns on top of whatever else they are means that you can't really get people in place to make long-term commitments to anything. And in fact, a lot of the media at home in most Western nations would balk at the idea that it's like, what do you mean our guys actually have to die and be there for 20 years in order to try and help people normalize to democracy, something which took us hundreds of years to get our head around, kind of thing. So I think what Syria ends up being is a conveniently small site for proxy wars between superpowers that don't really want to get involved, because if they get involved in a real way, that could endanger the world. But if they can keep it contained within literally 100 kilometers squared country, then that's pretty good, because everybody can shoot at everybody and no one really dies, and you get a few casualties, and who really cares who we're supporting this week? Just so long as it looks like we're supporting the ones that are better than the other sides. So it's really a quagmire on many, many levels. And I don't know if you can say that has one side been acting better than another. Has one side's treatment of the side which they don't like been humane, been in line with, let's say the idea that we don't just want this to be a continuous war. And I don't think we can really say that. There's definitely Russia's side, there's definitely the Islamist side, and there's definitely the American side. And no one really wants to commit to much of anything.
So I think it would be, I guess, I don't know if this is a good comparison, but because it's a, you were for or against what Syria did, and you chose your side, and so hopefully one of the sides wins. Would you would this be a fair comparison kind of to the sneakiness of the Cold War, where we kind of didn't really say, hey, we're going to go to war with you, but we're going to support this kind of thing and kind of attack on these grounds in this way? Is that a good comparison, do you think, or is that probably a different situation?
I think it's actually a really apt comparison. I think one of the oddest things in the fallout of the Cold War is that nobody assumed, I think, that Russia would become a superpower again quite so quickly. And no one really was thinking about what would happen if they did. And what worked with dealing with Russia in the past was a Cold War / proxy war state of affairs. And so it's like, well, essentially, Russia is weaker than the Soviet Union in terms of how many countries it controls directly, but it's still a superpower. And we don't really want to tick it off. And so it appears that between superpowers with conflicting ideologies, Cold War is a better state than hot war. And ergo, let's see if we can just make sure that our Cold Wars don't have too many international ramifications, so we can all seem like we're doing something. We can all seem like we're supporting our own ideology, because in the absence of Cold Wars, that's when things really get touchy, let's say.
Well, I thank you for. I appreciate that. My comparison was very, very apt. That's good. It's good news. Yeah, I think it's all a bit crazy. I mean, I think that, and I don't. I'm no expert in this issue. Of course, it's terrible that the citizens have been attacked, and it's also really awful that they're caught up between the political wars of the U.S. and Russia and all the other countries out there. I've actually heard a few things about this is U.S. versus Russia, it's U.S. versus Britain, and all these alliances being made and stuff, and just everyone going crazy about who, what did where, and all these just making up things for the headlines and stuff. But that's just really terrible. And so I guess there's no in your opinion, there's not really a good we should kind of maybe do this and we can look neutral. There's nothing much that we can do to look good or bad, I guess.
More so, what you would have to do is say, we don't care if we look good. What we care about is in 10 years' time, is the region stable? And this is where I think a lot of what's happening is being won and lost, is it becomes too much of a PR thing and less about what results, what end goal is there going to be, because nobody really wants to have to baby these countries indefinitely for the next 20 years or maybe even 40 years, when that's kind of what it takes. It's like, so if we look at Britain, for example, and I know people will be really annoyed that I'm saying Britain actually understood what it was to be a international power that had aspirations over other nations better than many nations right now, because most nations right now want to appear good, even though they might not be up to the best sort of business in terms of their actions. For the British, they show up in Egypt and they go, we're going to be here for 100 years. And because of those imperialistic tendencies, they could actually think about how they're going to shape this nation because they're there, and they thought of it as being a part of their empire. Whereas this hands-off Cold War approach, it's like, we don't want to get our hands dirty, so let's send in some tactical strikes and some small, really efficient teams for doing stuff. But let's not put any boots on the ground, and let's not say that we're taking control of your nation, and yet still expecting to be able to bring about real change. It's a bit counterintuitive.
So touchy, yeah, I can agree with that one overall. Well, hopefully that gets a bit more resolved and that kind of thing, because that's just it's just really unfortunate when you have this kind of thing happen with this leadership there. And I don't think that it was nice to see that when it came to U.S. versus North Korea, we seem to kind of avoid major conflict. Now there's just one more to worry about. So hopefully we can avoid any more giant death tolls and that kind of thing. But luckily, we do have. I don't know if you saw, Nikki Haley gave a great little speech there about what the hell's going on here. Kind of. I don't know if you saw Nikki Haley at the UN recently.
I know that she actually got into some hot water with the Trump administration because she was given information to release, and then it changed, and nobody bothered to tell her that she wasn't supposed to say what she was going to say in terms of the Russia sanctions.
Yes, I heard the same thing. She lied or had to take something back, and it was basically just because she uh, was not misinformed. Well, I guess technically she was misinformed, but she didn't regret what she said because at the time it was true. And it's like, oh, she was leaking information, blah blah. And he's like, no, the information changed and they didn't tell me in time. So here's what's gonna happen here. With that, and then I've also been told that I believe there's a new theory that Pence and Nikki Haley want to overthrow Trump, which I don't get, but that's the new running theory. So I don't know if you heard about that one.
Well, question would be, what do you mean by overthrow? Like within the American system, I know that you can actually have a no confidence vote in the president, but the president is a separate entity from the parties in power. So here in Canada, if we had a no confidence vote in a prime minister, that would mean that he would no longer be the head of the party and no longer be the prime minister, right? In the American context, if there's a no confidence vote, essentially all Congress is saying, or the party is saying, is we're no longer going to vote in favor of any of your positions, and we might seek an attempt to impeach you or find some means to show that you are not, let's say, mentally competent enough for your position. So it's a really different kind of ball game because I'm not sure what sort of process that would be, but what would Haley and Pence gain basically almost 2 years into the administration at being saying like, oh well, we helped with these past 2 years, but they were completely wrong. I also think it kind of assumes that these people have way more power than they actually do. And I don't think that any of them would actually try and forcibly remove Donald Trump at this point because everything, or at least most things, politically speaking, are going fairly well in the United States, aside from some of the Gong Show sideshow.
Yeah, that's fair. It's too getting a bit too crazy. No, I mean, as far as I know now, I mean, the only thing that really is could potentially hurt Trump in the future is if he does decide to fire Mr. Mueller over the investigation, which at this point, all the commentators I listen to say don't do that. It's bad. Just let it go. Let it happen. Don't give them any more reason to put anything more onto you, which I mean, that's fair enough. But and I think I don't know if you heard of this. I heard recently that, or not recently, it's now it's been a week or so ago, but the one part of the investigation said they had found nothing with Trump. So I mean, hopefully, I don't know. I mean, at this point, would you say that that we found nothing and we should just move on, or do you think that there's would you say this investigation has kind of been a waste? Is that a fair statement?
Um, I don't know if it's been a waste. I think what it is it's been a investigation that perhaps went on too long in absence of plausible information being released or discovered. So it's like, but isn't that essentially saying it's a waste? It's like, well, no, because once again, getting back to what I said earlier, it shows that the Republicans are willing to let the DOJ operate properly, which is if we appoint a special counsel, we will allow the special counsel to operate, and we will try our best not to interfere with it in any way, shape, or form, even if it really annoys us. And, this is actually good on Trump. He did not close it so much as even though he desired to do so. So people were literally sitting down and saying, Mr. Trump, you have to follow due process. And if you did nothing wrong, due process isn't going to bite you. And it looks like due process isn't going to bite him. So it's like this is, after a long run, actually what was supposed to happen. And it's like, if you did nothing wrong, we made sure we covered all our bases. And because we covered all our bases, you don't have to worry that someone receives special treatment or that someone's interests were being looked out for in a way that would go beyond what the purview of our particular, our particular role is, that being the special prosecutor. So this is exactly the opposite of what James Comey did or tried to pull for Hillary Clinton. And that's a good thing. Yeah, it might be a bit odd to hear that, but I actually think this is as good of a special investigation process as possible. And I think the party in power treated it with as much respect as they were allowed to or able to. And the guy gets off scot-free. And it's like, well, that would make perfect sense, because if there was nothing found, the process was put through, everything is good.
Yeah, that sounds fair. Well, I mean, I think people really hate that word fair, but that sounds reasonable, and it's good to see that more has been uncovered about the DNC than, Trump over any collusion or any mishandlings with laws and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I could think there's been good and bad to happen overall, and I hope that well, I guess the better question is, since all this is coming out, do you think that does it, in your opinion, does it look like maybe things are coming to a close, or do you think that this is just something that they might as well leave open forever until they find the smallest scrap of something to throw on there? Or do you think that eventually they might give up?
I don't know. It will all boil down to whether Mueller actually says, okay, this is the end date, it's done. And if he can do that, I think it'll show very well on the process. I think the longer it drags on, though, the more it just seems that it's a waste of resources, even though the process might be okay. And it's not to anyone's benefit to keep an investigation going where there isn't really any new leads. I think that the problem is a lot of people are seeing what's going on with Trump's lawyer as an extension of what Mueller investigation is, when in fact they're two entirely separate things, and should be treated as such. So if the Mueller investigation winds down, having done its job and done due diligence without any outside interference, great. If the new thing brings up information which the Mueller investigation didn't, well, that's perfectly fine, because they're supposed to be looking at two different things.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, we'll have to go and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I honestly just hope that we can get on the one hand, I kind of hope it ends, because it's kind of ridiculous and has been a bit blown out of proportion. On the other hand, we keep finding things about, the Clinton Foundation and the DNC and all those things, so there's definitely that balance there. But I mean, it would be nice if we stopped wasting time and kind of get down to here's the facts, here's what we know, we can prosecute, all those fun things and overall. But I mean, I think overall, Trump's done okay. Some of the promises he's kept are good, some of them aren't so good, and that is and is not his fault in some regards. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I guess, or maybe fortunately, it could be worse, so that's better. But yeah, I mean, this has been a crazy rocking time thus far, so potentially the voting should be starting, and hopefully we'll see what happens this November, because that'll be changing quite a bit there. And actually, that reminds me, I was going to ask you, is there any what are the a quick digression, in Canada there, are your officials elected as frequently, or I guess there are different roles for your officials like our senators are? How's that? How would you compare the election cycle for your leaders over there?
So we actually have a 5-year cycle as opposed to a 4-year. And we do have a mid-cycle turnover, so midterm elections, but not to the same degree as you guys do. So every 5 years, there's an election called, and depending on which of the cycles you're on, you could have to face a midterm election. But by and large, there doesn't tend to be all that much turnover in our midterm elections as opposed to in the States. Because of the two-party system, it's an effective way of protesting, and also an effective way of looking at perhaps some apathy within your own party if things are going well, by seeing that not everyone who voted during the primary elections showed up when the basically midterms are around. But it's also, as I say, quite different because it's easier to get rid of a prime minister potentially than it is to get rid of a president. But in the same way, it's also the Prime Minister of Canada on paper has more direct power over what goes on in our country than what the President of the United States has.
Interesting. Okay. And remind me, how many, I know, of course, we have, 2 senators per state. What is the breakdown for the members in Parliament?
So there is a formula for how many people, and it has to do with particular electoral ridings. I'm not sure if it's due to the number of people, just because there are certain regions in Canada where there's like next to nobody, and so they have to amalgamate those ones into one large super region in order to make them actually effective or cohesive as a political unit. But we also have a Senate as well. Right, but our Senate is purely appointed. It's not actually elected. So our Senate is unreflective in terms of political representation. And it tends to be that the Senate is filled with appointees from the previous government, and then the new government tries to set up more appointees because our Senate is, within reason, you're a senator for life. So it's really hard to get rid of old senators, which is becoming more of a sticky issue with Canadians. But essentially, in terms of how voting process goes around and the fact that you have ridings like in the States, that's exactly what we have here in Canada.
Huh, that sounds a little unfortunate, or fortunate, however that may be. Yeah, it sounds a little crazy, but overall. So yeah, I think everything's still crazy, which is sad, but good things are happening, and I hope that things get better. I think that it's, you kind of got to laugh at how crazy things are with the leaders and the accusations being thrown around with all the less information is what we have right now. So it's all a little bit crazy. But would you say that hopefully we can both agree that things could be worse, right?
Well, yeah, no, absolutely, things could be worse, and things could be better too. But your country still is together. There aren't many riots going on in the streets. Violent crime is going down. So the fact that all we can bitch about is politics is a pretty good representation of how far we've come.
I think so. We're still pretty free and fair, as no matter what anyone says. And it's I'd rather be living now than in the 60s or 70s back in the day. This is a much better time to be around and be alive and be successful, and be what you want to be, which I think is a much more positive note to end on. So I will say again, all of you out there on YouTube, please come back next week. I want to give another shout out. I keep endorsing him again. He's not paying me, but of course everyone should go and buy Mr. Peterson's book, 12 Rules to Life. Go see him on the Bill Maher show. Look at those interviews. Go and listen, and go to his next. I think he's doing his book tour with Dave Rubin right now. I don't know the next stop they're going to take, but they're doing that tour. So if you're in the area, go visit him, ask him a bunch of questions, and mention us. Also, before I forget, if you are new to this channel or the podcast, please go and stick around, or I'm sorry, please go and look at JP's podcast. He's doing some interviews now, and one interview actually with the Great Duff on this channel, and I think he did another interview with Stan, another YouTuber, recently. And so yeah, go check out JP and all those fun guys, and go support them. So that should cover us right now, and I think until next week, guys, we will say goodnight. So any last words there, Duff?
Have a good week, everyone.
All right, awesome. You guys have a great one, and we will see you soon. Thanks.